Well, my name is David Snee. I'm the sub-officer in charge of the equipment maintenance department. We maintain all equipment on fire engines, ambulances. Everything a station officer or a district officer in a station needs to run a fire station comes through here. He obviously needs his fire engine or his ambulance. He needs it to be serviced and capable of doing the job. He needs the equipment on it. He needs the firefighters to have their helmet and their gloves and their proper protective equipment, from gas detection units, it's still BA sets obviously, all the equipment on the ambulances, defibrillators, suction units, all that sort of stuff. And that needs to be calibrated and tested and all that. That's what we do here. So every aspect of supplying that service to operations is what we do. Some of our equipment, for example, would be our breathing apparatus sets, for example, would have a 12-monthly span on them where they have to get an annual check. Now, as I say, the beauty of our department here is, because of the fact that all the guys here are operational firefighters originally by trade, I'm not going to fix a BA set here, and if there was any doubt with it at all, I'm not going to put it out on a fire engine, because I know what the guys out there need. And that's how, when a BA equipment, which say for example, is repaired, maintained and recorded that on such and such a date, that was fine and it's going to be good for the next 12 months. It goes, and it is right. If there's any doubt at all, it doesn't go out. If a guy has an accident with a BA set and God forbid gets killed, and his wife and family need to know that why it happened to him or what happened to him, and then if it was a particular piece of equipment that caused his death or his illness or his trauma, well, how to compensate them for that. And that's the most important thing, having the records to say that when the guys went down to take the boat out into the river to retrieve a body or to retrieve somebody that's drowning, that they know that their life jacket's going to work. They know if they fall in the river, their life jacket's going to inflate and do what it has to do. And that's ultimately the important part of what we do here. Well, I'm very fortunate in that one, that I never had any aspirations as a child about being a fireman. I went to do my schooling, did my FCA training, worked in a pub, and just happened to be with a school club one day, and we seen the ad in the paper. He actually seen the ad and said, "Would you not try that?" And I said, "I will." And I tried it, and I was very fortunate to get it. And that was in 1985, which is, at this stage, I'm starting 29 years. Prior to coming into fire brigade, it was never a vocation for me. But after I came in, I realised what it was, and it then became a career. And that's how I found that's what I get out of the whole job. Well, I don't know whether bravery comes into it or not, because I don't think there's too many people that would consider themselves to be anyway particularly extra brave or cowardly, because obviously the opposite of being brave is cowardly, and I don't think there's too many cowards out there. Even the normal person on the street isn't a coward as such. But I find you don't need to be brave to be a firefighter. You need to be confident in your equipment, which means if you come up to a building, you come up to a 2-story house and it's on fire, you need to know that if you're going to go into that building, that the equipment you have, your training and all your knowledge and experience gained over the years is going to be the thing that's going to bring you out of that building. The 3 primary tasks is save life, save property, and to render humanitarian services, in that order. So the primary thing would be to save somebody's life, and then maybe to save their house or their business or their building or their car or whatever they're having, their trauma. And then the next thing then would be the dog in the kid, the liffey, or the horse trapped in a bush or something like that, or a cat up a tree. That's where the different active. But as I say, most guys in the fire brigade are caring individuals, and it's more caring, I think, than being brave. The most important thing, I suppose, is your fire engine with water and a hose and a branch that's going to be able to put water on a fire. And if you go to a skip on fire, a car on fire, the basic thing would be your hose and your water. But I mean, when you come to a situation where you go to a house or a factory or a school, if that's on fire, water is a pretty important thing. But you also need all the other facets, which would be your breathing set, because if you can't go into an atmosphere and breathe in it, you can have all the water in the Atlantic and it's not going to be any use to you. So there's primarily several different important pieces of equipment, and then they would probably be the water and the hose, the breathing set, and then after that, they're the things that give you your dry suit, for example, your life jacket. They're the things that give you the capability to fulfill your function. Plenty of times we would, we have things called SOGs, standard operational guidelines, and the guideline or standard operational procedures is another facet of that particular thing. I mean, we can't legislate for everything. Every different possible scenario that you can think of has to have a guideline as to what you do, but your guideline only goes so far, and then after that, then you have to improvise. If you have to improvise, overcome and adapt, the way the Marines, I think, say about it. I mean, I can remember being at a fire in number 28 Castle Street about 22, 23 years ago. I know it's a sad reflection when I can even think of the address. The building was on fire, and we couldn't get. You could see the building inside blazing from 3 floors, from the ground up. You couldn't get water into the building because none of the windows were broken, and it was an old, toughened glass that wouldn't break with the heat or wouldn't break with whatever, and we ended up throwing stones to break the windows. And that's how, I mean, there's a classic example of you don't have a bag of stones on a fire engine for breaking windows. But you have different aspects of difficulty. I mean, you have physical difficulty and you have mental difficulty as well. I mean, physically there wouldn't be any tasks I don't think I've ever not been able to achieve because of a physical ailment of not being strong enough or big enough or able to do something. But the big block would be the mental thing, where if you end up in a situation where you do end up with having an unfortunate victim where they've passed away or whatever, and then dealing with that whole aspect, that would be the big thing, the big problem with trying to dealing with death. But again, we have the other side of the coin, where I've delivered 13 babies, so I've seen all. I know in fairness, I've probably brought more dead people through fires in hospitals and car crashes to a hospital and that, but that's probably in the hundreds and probably even the thousands. But the small number of the 13 deliveries I've had, I can remember every one of them. The 13 deliveries compensate me for the hundreds or thousands of deaths. On the fire engine you have, say, 6 persons. The officer is there, but the officer ultimately on a fire engine is the guy that decides who does what, assesses what a building, if you come to a building on fire, is it going to take 1 length of hose, 2 lengths of hose, who does what. You need to know, you need to depend on the guy, the guy beside you is even thinking, let alone what he's going to do. And when all the guys would know, pulling up at an incident, what their job is going to be, 9 times out of 10 the officer won't even have to say what you need to do, because everybody should have knowledge of what the job is going to entail. So on the team thing, it certainly is a big thing that we work together. The team goes from the 2 on the ambulance. If you have a bigger incident where you have 20 fire engines, that you could have 100 firefighters there. That's the big team when everybody's playing their part. Position number 5 traditionally would have been filled by the senior man, the oldest guy on the crew, because that would be the guy that would just get the standpipe and the hose and go and find a hydrant and bring the water to the fire engine, where the guys marked 2 and 4 would generally be the junior men or the recruits, where they would be the ones that would be getting stuck into doing the fires. And that would be the only aspect of officially within management, where there are different aspects of working to your ability. And the way the fire brigade would work, it's a pretty much a military structure. So you come in at the bottom rank as a firefighter, and you go through the ranks. There's 7 or 8 ranks between firefighter and chief fire officer, and then obviously at whatever rank you're at or whatever stage you're at, you either take orders from above and do your job, and then give orders to people that are below you in ranks. The honour system then will be completely different. The way most guys in the fire brigade look at it is that their bravery award is their lead or medal, as they call it, is getting paid on a Thursday.
My name is Pat Murphy. I'm 71 years of age, and my wife and I spent 9 years sailing around the world. The plan was 4 or 5 years, but somehow or other we managed to stretch it out to 9 years, and it was the most wonderful time. We spent 4 years in the planning of the whole thing. First of all, we were having to look for the right type of boat, because there are boats that are suitable for long distance and boats that are not suitable for long distance. And the money was also a big factor. We had to balance the two together on it. We spent a lot of time researching the necessities of sailing long offshore, particularly with the weather patterns. You have to cross the Atlantic outside of the hurricane season. You cross the Pacific outside the cyclone season. And these were all factors that determined just exactly when we would go and where we would stay and everything else during those particular seasons on it. The equipment we brought with us, the best piece of equipment that we had was a single sideband radio, which is a long distance high frequency radio. And with that we were able to communicate anywhere in the oceans back to our families with emailing backwards and forwards and get weather reports on it. We couldn't surf the net, but we were able to just send the emails, and that was a very, very efficient system on it. So it kept us in contact with the family and with the outside world, even on the 23 days that it took us to cross the Pacific Ocean. With regard to the water, we went down from Ireland, we sailed down to England, the south of England, to Falmouth, and we had a water maker fitted, and we were able to produce 45 litres of fresh water from seawater per hour. Now that was a bit heavy on the batteries, we could only do that with the engine running, but that meant that we never had a problem with water. And even without that, we were able to carry in 2 big tanks with 700 litres of water before we left the port. Diesel-wise was always a big concern on it. We carried enough diesel for about 500 miles. But when you're travelling across a big ocean that's nearly 3,000 miles, you know, you really have to conserve your diesel and do as much sailing as you possibly can and keep the diesel for emergency. When we were crossing the Pacific Ocean 23 days, I mean, when you're out then 12 days, like nearly 2 weeks out there, you're in the middle of the ocean and there's nothing anywhere near you. And you're just on your own, and you have to rely on each other for so much. And it really builds up a good bit of teamwork. And yes, we did feel very much alone, and we knew that if we got into difficulty, that the chances of being rescued and getting help from shore-based facilities would be probably negligible. People ask us the question, did we ever feel like just giving up and heading back home again? And throughout the 9 years, it never really crossed our mind, because we were really enjoying it from day one. There were times when the weather was bad and we were caught in storms and everything else. You might ask yourself, what are we doing with ourselves out here? And that would pass. And we sailed something like 40,000 miles in that 9 years. And I would think the amount of bad weather we got was probably in the region of maybe less than 10%. The rest of the weather was fine, and so we had no real problems. On the travels, we had to adapt to the various cultures that we met, and we came across many, many cultures. We actually visited 39 different countries, and the majority of them had completely different cultures. We found the people everywhere to be very helpful and friendly. And all they wanted to do anywhere was just to raise their children, get some money for their children, education, and for their food is the main thing, not so much education, that was secondary. The food was number one on it. On the big crossing, as an example, at night time, we did 3 hours on watch and 3 hours off watch. Olivia would go from watch from 7:30 to 10:30. I did it from 10:30 to 1:30. She would do it from 1:30 in the morning to 4:30, and I'd come back on at 4:30 until 7:30. And the reason we did it that way was because when I come off at 7:30, I would be getting ready to go on the radio on the radio net to talk with all the other boats that might be in the area on it. And she would have had her 3 hours sleep, 3.5 hours sleep before I started. I'd never read books before I headed off, but Olivia got me into it, and I read quite a few novels on the way across. And Olivia is big into reading. She could read a book a day nearly. And as far as when we go into an anchorage with some other boats there was always somebody would have a book swap, and Olivia would bring her books over, or they'd bring their books over to Olivia, and we'd swap books and that. So there was a good bit of camaraderie among the other people that might be sailing in the area. And of course, remember that everybody is going in the same direction because of currents and weather patterns. Reading back through history, when the likes of Captain Cook and these people arrived in some of these, like Tahiti and French Polynesia, when they were discovering it, when read what he found and what we found, like a couple of 100 years later, the place has changed dramatically in some of the more popular islands. But you have all the modern conveniences in some of these popular places, whereas in the remote islands themselves, they're still as Captain Cook would have found them a couple of hundred. What advice would I give to somebody who might be contemplating sailing around the world? The first thing is to have a partner with you that you can get on very, very, very well with. If you're going just with one partner, you really have to know them inside out. And the second thing is the proper boat, well equipped. Because there's no point, there are some boats now that would be very uncomfortable and make life very, very difficult on it. So, and the third thing would be to do a lot of research, plan your routes, plan your timing for going to various places on it. Do a good trial run on your boat to suss it all out. We were able to, when we bought the boat in Mallorca, we sailed it back to Ireland. That's about 1,800 miles. So that gave us a great shakedown cruise before we set off the following year on the big trip. So there were a couple of little things that we just had to change. But and I think that's essential on it. But the big thing is to have your partner with you, or partners, depending on whether you're taking a couple of people with you, that you're compatible with, because there's nothing worse than to be out in the middle of an ocean where you're having a row with somebody.